Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Motor City Madmouth. You guessed it, I am the Motor City Madmouth, and I am joined by Trent Clark, CEO and coach and author. And Trent, pull that book out. Let them know what you're author about.
I'm author of Leading Winning Teams. There we go. The book just came out Tuesday. Got started shipping and hitting bestseller lists all over the place. Super fired up. Tell them about your book, Scott.
All right, I'll do that, Trent. We got lessons from the microphone, tuning into the enduring wisdom of visionary leaders. So I have a second one that'll be coming out probably beginning of next year. I'll be working on it at the end of the year once I get a lot of stories all finished up, but really looking forward to it. My book is Old School Media versus New School Media, where people can learn a lot about what was, what is, and who knows what's going to be next, which is why there will be a second sequel to it. With that said, let's give everybody an idea of what we're doing tonight. Do we know what we're doing tonight? Of course we know what we're doing tonight. We're going to talk about being under pressure. You and I have certainly been under it a lot of time by the respective occupations. You being in the baseball world, me being all over the media, and if anybody knows it, we certainly do. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do, though, Trent. I'm going to go over my example first, okay? And then we're going to follow up with yours, and then we'll have another topic at the end to wrap it up. First of all, my example comes from, you guessed it, the book, Lessons from the Microphone. My book. And that I actually at that time worked at the Tampa Tribune covering the 1985 Florida State League All-Star Game in Osceola County Stadium in its first year. That was a spring training home of the Houston Astros and, of course, the Florida State League team as well, the Osceola Kissimmee Astros. So I had a really productive week. You know, I got to go to the luncheon featuring a lot of former Major League legends. Won't get into them now. But I came up with two stories, you know. I had a feature story and a game story. But remember when they provided those company computers where you had a computer, you lift it up, you have those suction cups in them? You remember those? Or, of course.
Yeah, that's old school, man.
Oh, yeah, that's as old school as you get. You talk about rotary phones and the old suction cup. Well, guess what happened to me? I couldn't transmit the story 5 times. 5 stinking times. Really? Seriously? I have to rant every week anyways on some, but I couldn't do it 5 times. And you know what Saturday deadlines are like? Oh, they're brutal because the Sunday paper comes out. Everybody that wants to know that you got to be a salesman in life, you got to be a salesman. So luckily I had a good editor by the name of Rick Nelson, and he's actually in the book. And what I was able to do with Rick was I got my deadline extended by 40 minutes, and I dictated both stories word for word, and Rick did an unbelievable job putting them in there. Now, what's nice about it is I ended up keeping that story as a souvenir. I have it put away in a nice spot, and it's in the book. You won't be able to read it, okay? But the reality of the situation is this. Anytime you go through that much duress on a Saturday night, it wouldn't happen any good on a Sunday night anyways, or any night during the week, and you have to dictate 2 stories. But Rick was cool, calm, and collective. And, you know, the best part about the whole thing is when you have an editor that's really cool, calm, and collective, it enabled me to keep my composure. He said, don't worry, we'll take care of it. You know, I told the people that, hey, you always make every deadline, but you're at a brand new ballpark out there, which is new in business, and the phone system is all messed up, and you have to get the kinks out of it. So, but you know what? Here's the thing, okay? The way I look at it was I enjoyed the pressure. It was obviously I was like 19 or 20 years old, early age. And, you know, it taught me, so, you know, newspapers can be filthy and nasty when you have things. You don't even have the technology to deal with all that stuff. But in the end, you know what? We got through it. I was getting paid per story and mileage, so I certainly wasn't going to go back to Tampa with no money after the amount of expense I had. Of course, they paid the company hotel anyhow. But you know the amazing part about the whole thing, Trent, is later on I covered a spring training game there when the Tigers were playing the Houston Astros and bumped on my longtime colleague Lynn Henning. And you know what? They have internet. I told him, you know, Lynn, the last time I was in this building, I told him what happened. And he said, wow. Can you believe that? That happened. But you know what? You're better off because of it. He said everybody's got to deal with it. I've had to deal with crazy extenuating circumstances as well. And when you go out there and deal with it, then nothing phases you. If you've ever covered high school football, that's even tough too because you have to come up with your own yards, and you're the guy that's a statistician. But I love baseball an awful lot. Let's face it, we both have baseball backgrounds. You obviously strength and conditioning coach, have 3 rings to show for it. Me, well, there you go. And the man probably displays them, and he should probably display them. And and I won a championship in 1973, the year that my grandfather died, and we were 21-0 for the Southfield Wildcats back
Mm.
then under a tough year. But I think the moral of the story, and folks, what we really want everybody to get out of these shows is, regardless of whether they're 10 minutes, 30 minutes, it doesn't make a difference how long the episode is this. Pressure is something we deal with on a lot of different levels, okay? We all have to deal with it. That's part of life, whether it's a car breaking down or whether it's your job. You have to deal with a boss that you're not comfortable with, but it's how you handle it. And if you handle it to the best, and I'm not saying that we're not going to blow a gasket every now and then, Trent, I'm sure you probably have too. But my Aunt Judy once told me, Scott, I don't even know how you thrive under pressure. She says to me, sometimes when things get worse, you get better. But it's built inside of you, is really what it is. How would you define pressure before we get to yours?
Well, I love this story just because I think pressure makes diamonds, right? Like, I mean,
Right.
and this is the thing that pressure is always around, it's always available. We could apply it to a lot of different things, and it has to be managed, which is something that's big. And, the one thing that I think that I hear in your story, Scott, is this was a pretty regular thing in the news business. You always have deadlines. You always have these things, and they are looming, and there's no second chance. This is a challenge I've got with schools today. It's like, oh, well, the test is Friday. Hey, I'm not ready. Well, that's okay. You could take it Tuesday. I'm like, wait a minute. How does that work? Like, that's crazy. We have to shape and teach kids that these are deadlines, and pressure is going to be, if you didn't do the work all week and you got to start studying on Thursday night, then you do it. Now, in your situation, not any lack of preparation. This is an unfortunate issue with technology that you're battling. And
Right.
so now all of a sudden, like, hey, this is back to my podcast, right? Winners find a way.
Right.
Winners, when shown data that they're losing, find a way to win. And you're thinking immediately through 20 different scenarios. How fast can I drive back to Tampa? How fast can I do this? What if I had to go and dictate this thing? Could I send a fax? 1,000 things go through your mind, and you land on, listen, if my editor will take this over a dictation, we can do that. And of course, now, I mean, think about this today, Scott. If this were today, you could literally call a computer that would dictate your voice control and put it into an email, and you could solve that issue today probably in about 4 minutes. But back then, that wasn't the scenario, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that time seemed like an eternity there. But you know what? I guess the one thing that's important that we have to understand is this: the relationship you have with your editor. Okay, if you have an editor that knows who you are, okay, then he's going to say it's no problem. I know your track record. Let me tell you an interesting story about this guy. His name is Rick Nelson, one of my favorite people I ever worked with at the Tampa Tribune. Okay, I'm covering a Detroit. I'm not covering. I'm actually going to a Detroit Lions game as a student at University of South Florida. Okay, get this. And Wayne Fonts, his son Mike, is in the USF Communication Department. So afterwards, well, of course, the Lions lost to the Bucks. Then again, we were used to that. Tough, it is what it is.
It's a conference
But
game.
yeah. Well, actually, they were in the same division at that time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So you can see half Honolulu Blue and half Honolulu and Tampa. So after it, I went over to Hooters with my buddies, and we all had a good old time. But I had a story or two to do after I got done, and I had to have another deadline about 7, 8 o'clock that night. So you think the deadline's early before, they're then. So who's the editor on the desk? Rick Nelson. Oh, my goodness. So I write a couple stories, and Rick says to me, I need to have a talk with you. Oh, am I in trouble? No. This is one of the best stories you've ever written in your entire life. What got into you? Hey, Rick, if I tell you this, I'm probably going to get fired for what I'm going to tell you. He said, no, what's that? The Lions lost and I had a few beers. He said, Scott, if you ever have a few beers and you write this like this again, I will never say a darn word. You made my life a whole lot easier because you did. Drink beer, I don't care. But you know what I always used to do with Rick, though? And that's this. Every time I was one of those types of guys that I'm a student, okay? Every time he edited my stuff, I sat next to the guy and said, what did I do wrong? And he always liked that. None of the other writers and correspondents, Trent, okay, ended up doing that. Hey, turn it in. We're done. Let the editor take it. What did I do wrong? What do I need to do better? He appreciated that. And I
Yeah.
think that anytime you can go out there and find that you're coachable, like you say, winners find a way. Well, that's what intrigues me about everything you do, because that's what you're breaking down with your whole situation to begin with. Okay, winners find a way. I'll make me a winner finding a way. It's either get paid or not, but learn about it. But what made it so fun is I got to put it in the book way later on, so it wasn't so bad either. But you have to be coachable, right? And under that situation, I didn't know what else to do, but I thought, you know what, we're going to get this thing to them. But the worst part about the whole thing is I had my feature story done 3 hours before the deadline because I already did. All I had to do was go ahead and write the game story in between, but then I couldn't do it. Rick,
Yeah.
believe me.
Yeah, I think there's a big part of the story too as a young man, all the lessons you learned, like how valuable it was to be prepared because when an emergency happened, you didn't have two articles to write. You only needed one because you'd done
Right.
your prep work and you were complete. That's a huge deal. I think the other big shot to young Scott Morganroth, the young Motor City Madmouth at the time, was the issue of confidence. Man, like you faced a significant adversity as a young man,
Right.
got through it, learned a bunch, and said, man, I don't want to put myself in that situation again. Now, stuff will come up. What went right? What could have gone better? And I think reevaluating that after pressure situations is really important to learn and take those lessons away. But, after you've done so many reps in pressure, Scott, as a journalist, as a media spokesperson, as a longtime member of the media community, man, there's a lot of confidence. I always say people, confidence comes from prep and reps. So you get prepared by going through the classes, going through, hey, how could I have done this article better? You did a lot of preparation work all the time. You went to journalism, you go get your coursework at South Florida. There's all these things. So preparation is high.
Right.
Then we start getting reps. And we're learning good stuff. And we learn a lot of things, mostly from the bad stuff, right? Like our reps, often the negative things teach us a lot more. But the really good ones sponge off both the good and the bad. Hey, when he comes back and says, man, this is the article of the century. I love this thing. We're going, hey, man, let me think back. What made it so good? What did I do differently? Man, I made better outline work on this. I got started on this earlier than usual. I did this thing. I did 3 more calls than I usually do to do some prep work. Like whatever it was that triggered that, you are doing an evaluation. I call it like an audit of excellence, right? Where you're like, hey, I'm going back to that journey of excellence and what really went right. Because when what athletes do really well, and you know this, Scott, from covering them, is that when athletes do something better than anybody else,
Right.
they repeat that over and over again until someone stops them. Because why wouldn't I keep going? Until you can stop me beating you at my own game and being very successful at it, I'm not going to change. I'm going to just keep refining my ability, developing my adaptability skills. When someone does put a kibosh on what I'm trying to do, can I pivot to those other things and still be successful? But I think those valuable lessons of pressure are so important. I have one more thing on pressure that I think is really important, but I'll leave you with that right now. That was my view of how pressure makes diamonds, and I think it was really shaping you into a gem at that time.
Well, thank you, Trent. Those are really kind of you to say all those things. The reality of situations. I don't watch a lot of TV anymore, but one of the shows I did watch was Pardon the Interruption with Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser. But the one thing that Tony and Mike are, and I met them both at one point, is this. One of the things they say, let's see if we can do better the next time. And that's the attitude that people should have. It isn't what you've done right here. Don't rest on your laurels. The heck with all that. Let's see if we can do better the next time. I never think I'm good enough. People always think I'm hard on myself. So what? So what? You want to do good. You don't want to. I hate to lose. As you can tell in my voice, I don't like losing. Losing to me is criminal. Okay, but the reality is, let's see if we can do better the next time. And when you put things in perspective, excuse me, you have to have that attitude in life because you know what? In this day and age, things are so much easier. And when they were harder on us, we had to make the most of it. You know, back in the day when we were growing up, I only had like 6, 7 TV stations, and that was about it. Back in Detroit, you had Windsor, which was 7, Wild Week and Holly. Of course, you had Hockey Night in Canada, wasn't so bad either, but still, being in Metro Detroit. But the reality of the situation is this, okay? Your book, Winners Find a Way. So that's a great title, and I know that people, when they go out there and start to buy that book, they're going to realize that, you know what, if you don't get nothing off of that book, then you didn't read it. You took the Evelyn Wood speed reading course on it and didn't get anything out of it. Now, let me point out something else about the reality, and that's this, okay? In my book, okay, this is more like a thing where anybody can go out there and look at it and learn from it. It's a textbook / entertainment, old school versus new school media. But I think the one thing that you have to understand, as much as you absorb all this material, practice, knowledge is power only if it's applied. And I think that now what's interesting about that story was when I went to USF, I never got in the mass communications department, even though I worked at the Tribune, because I had to type 30 plus words a minute and I couldn't do it. I'm a 3-finger typer that all I did was make deadlines, and that wasn't good enough. What do you think happens to me? I slide over to the communications department, no problem. I'll be more than happy to have you over here. All we do is talk about public speaking, interpersonal communication. All we talk about is group communication, interview communication. You get the drill, okay? So I wasn't good enough, okay, to work in the mass communications department. All I did was learn about those things called people, us, not like Lost in Space where you have the robot that does not compute. No, we all compute because we're people, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, for all you folks out there that remember where you all get all these shows, once upon a time, the shows were a whole lot different than they are now. Okay.
Yeah.
Marcus Welby was the guy that you had to deal with on the medical side. And then no NCIS back then. I wonder if anybody knew what NCIS was back then. Who knows? But the reality is this. Pressure is what it is, okay? You take a negative and turn it into positive. Yeah, I didn't get accepted. Looked at for mass communication. I didn't type fast enough, but the Tampa Tribune didn't go ahead and fire me because I was winning ugly, typing 3 or 4 fingers out of a possible 10. They just get it on time, you get paid, and they like me because I never missed a deadline. I always had my tape recorder out there to make sure everything was right so I couldn't misquote anybody. And the one thing I can tell people, and then we're going to switch it over to you, is this. Frank Reynolds, the renowned broadcaster for ABC, who's in my book, once again, I repeat, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders, during the Reagan assassination, when Brady, everybody thought he died, but he didn't die. Let's not get it first. Let's get it right. And that's what we all have to understand. So, but again, pressure to me is something we live with. Rest in peace, Aunt Judy, because you know what? Says I can never do it, but I'm proud of you for even doing it. My in-laws would always say when I'm driving in the middle of the night, oh, we're nervous that you're not going to be able to do this. And my wife Candy says, no, Mom, he's a different bird here. This guy gets stronger as the night wears on, and he thrives on this stuff. That's why she gave me another name that I didn't bother to trademark because I already got too much money invested in the Motor City Man Mouth called Crazy Man. Although I do tend to live up to that reputation on the line, especially when I'm driving. But I don't know if that's TMI, if there's some Smokies looking for a bandit out here, but whatever. All right, so let's transition over to yours.
Well, first of all, I love a couple of things you said. One is continuous improvement, Japanese Kaizen. I think that's huge. I think that people always can get better, right? So I love the fact that we're breaking down the film, finding out like, hey, what went well, what didn't go well. The other thing that you said, I don't like losing either. I'm in your camp, Scott. Like, I don't enjoy it at all. But I think it is part of the deal. I like your statement, losing's criminal. I would say, I tell a lot of people, losing is preventable. And so, hey, listen, we get ourselves confidence by getting very well prepared and getting a lot of reps. And the reality is like Wooden proved it over and over again. And what most people don't know about Coach John Wooden of UCLA fame, having won nine championships in 10 years. I mean, he never won a championship in the first 15 years. He's going through continuous improvement, developing his system. And what most people don't know is that people weren't coming to UCLA and Westwood to watch games. They were coming to watch Coach Wooden practice because he was refining preparation and repetition in practice. And so he was giving his teams confidence, 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 confidence. And so I just think that is the antidote to pressure. It is confidence, and you got to get that. And that doesn't come overnight. And I think a lot of people like, man, I'd like to handle pressure better. Yes, I would like to too in some situations. And so, unfortunately, there's certain situations we actually don't want the reps, right? The pressure of a very sick family member and having to care for them, and we may not have those skills. Like, that's not something I want to get better at because I don't want to repeat that, right? Like, it's not a value deal in the moment. It's so important. So you feel that pressure. But the other thing I will say about pressure, I think, is really important for people out there, is that pressure for me, and this is in my book, Leading Winning Teams, we talk about, it is about how teamwork, motivation, and strategy achieve big league success. And so when I think about strategy of pressure, I first of all want people to recognize that pressure is self-applied. If you didn't give a rat's care about your editor and that paper and that job, hey, this is a lousy job, you could walk on Saturday night and not ever deliver what they required of you and said, you know what, I don't care, and I can go get a job somewhere else, whatever. I'm not going to let that pressure in. There's a lot of people that hear things and they see somebody's comment on their social media post and they're like, oh my gosh, that person said, I have ugly eyes and, now I should wear colored contacts. Like, if you feel pressure from someone you don't even know who's telling you should look different, like, please do not give up that power in your life and allow someone else to dictate that you don't even know, who doesn't have any expertise. I have to let that pressure in. It is self-applied. So I allow that. So when I work for Coach Saban and Coach Saban says, hey, here's the demands, and they're heavy, right? And so I feel tons of pressure to do a very good job for Coach Saban. He put his name on the line for me, and I certainly do not want to let him down. So I apply a bunch of self-pressure to me. Now, some fan comes in, and I go do a talk in front of 500 people, and the reviews are in, and this one person says, man, what a lousy speaker. He tells all these sports stories. I don't care about these sports stories. This guy had nothing good to say for me, and I didn't learn a darn thing. But 497 people said, this is 5-star quality material. I'm so grateful I was here today. I'm taking away 3 points that are going to impact the way I raise my family, be a better husband or spouse, treat my children differently, be better on the job. 497. Should I go change my program because some person came in, might have gotten a bender on the way, having a bad day, and said, man, this program wasn't for me? I get it. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. But the pressure to change my program when literally 99% were very excited about the program is bonkers. That's crazy. And that's not to say, hey, don't take feedback, people. But you got to decide, hey, where am I going to take that in? That's where those trusted people come in. Scott, I think you felt that pressure because you respected Rick Nelson and you knew you had to do a good job for him and he was going on the line for you and this kid's going to deliver for me, and you're going out and feeling that pressure. And I think it was wise to feel that pressure. And but I will caution people about letting pressures in that don't and shouldn't apply in your life sometimes.
Well, let me ask you a question. Did you ever meet John Wooden?
I never met John Wooden.
Well,
Nope.
guess what? I did. And not only did I meet him, I interviewed him. And you know what?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did. One of the greatest interviews I've ever done in my entire life, Trent. I swear.
Heck yes.
But here's the thing. His pyramids is a success to me. I cherish those. I hang them up in my office. I go out there, and that's my Bible when it comes to life. You can have all kinds of different things you do. Nick Saban was an influence to you. Coach Wooden, I only met him one time when I was in L.A., and the University of Georgia was taking on UCLA. I went to the old Pauley Pavilion. Coach Wooden gave me whatever time I needed, and he was unbelievable. And then I picked his brain about the pyramid. He was great. Hey, I wish that time could have lasted forever, but they had
Yeah.
tip off, and that unfortunately sucked. But I wouldn't know that going in ahead. But I met them, and the reality is pyramid success. It's all in there, and I mentioned a lot of important people in my book, some of the top interviews. But you and I have had legendary mentors. Ernie Harwell, another one of the Detroit Tigers. You know him all too well. Gave
Yep.
me. He was always positive with me. Every time I had a question, never yelled at me if I did. No, no, it's okay. It's just hey, you know what? When you have love and mutual respect for somebody, they take it for better or for worse. And if you're worse, they just teach you to be better. Don Schultz, another one, intimidated the heck out of me until he got to like me. But it's not what this is really about mentors and all those. We'll do that for another show. Pressure is what's ingrained, and some people buckle under it and some don't. I'm just one of those people that would be bored if I didn't have it because I can count how many hours of sleep that I sleep in one week, probably on my hands and my feet, where everybody else is way smarter than I am. Okay, to be able to do a better job, I don't even care. There'll be a time when I can sleep forever and nobody will ever know. And I won't look anything like I do now. But I'm not going to go out there and tip my hand about how it should be and how it shouldn't be. All right, we covered my end. Now I want to hear about imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest challenges I see in highly successful people. And I think that people who are in the middle of a struggle, they're in the middle of a challenge right now, they look and say, wow, I'm seeing all these successful people, and they probably have never felt like I felt. And the reality is that I think it's very common for people to go through imposter syndrome. In fact, I tell a lot of people that they would be surprised at how many multi-million dollar athletes don't really want the last shot, don't really want the last at bat in the bottom of the ninth. They're surrounded by fabulous athletes, and they're with these people every day, and they start doubting, man, do I belong here? Because, like, this person's incredible. She's fabulous and better than me in every way. And you start thinking about that, going, man, I don't know if I'm worthy of being here. I don't know if I'm worthy of these accolades. I don't know if I'm worthy of this contract. And so understand that even successful people are playing this dangerous game called comparison, right? And it is easy to dive into an imposter syndrome, and it is directly a relation to the comparison game. And it's written in the Bible, it's written all over the place. Do not compare yourself to others. And yet it's such a human nature thing for us, Scott, that we're just like, man, how am I doing? Hey, is our show better than their show? How are they doing? And we could think about these things all the time. And the challenge is I recall a story back in 1997. I had been with the Cleveland Indians now over 3 years and been to 2 World Series in those 3 seasons. And I'm thinking, hey man, I'm doing a pretty good job. Like, I feel like I'm hitting the KPIs, the key performance indicators. We're training up people. We're voted the best player development program in Major League Baseball, which is a big responsibility of mine as a strength and conditioning guy. And I'm thinking, like, man, the organization must be really happy with hiring me. And they tell me that I have 1 year left on my agreement, which is an option year, and they let me know that they are not going to exercise my option.
Okay.
And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean you're not going to exercise my option? So, and they did not. And I was dumbfounded, man. I was a 27-year-old guy, almost 28 when my contract ended. And man, I was lost in imposter syndrome. Who am I now? I had tied my identity to my job, to where I live, to where I went to work every day. And that's not who Trent Clark was. Like, that's not who anyone knew me as a 14-year-old kid. And it's not who they knew me when, I was 20. And all these things changed all the time. But me as a person, I still had the same values. I still, loved the same parents. I mean, things really hadn't changed about who I was. I was certainly married to the same person still. And so I was caught in this identity crisis of who I am now. And I think creeped in some depression around, man, I'm not what I'm supposed to be. All these other people are being successful, getting multi-year contracts, and now I'm on the outside looking in. And it doesn't go through your mind when you enter pro sports that everybody's fired, right?
Right.
Because I'm not interested in getting fired. I'm interested in doing a great job and getting another job. And up until that point, I had always progressed to the next level and the next job, and I got opportunities, and I was like, man, this is great. And now I had been fired, and I'm like, oh. And as an athlete, we recognize like everybody ends on a loss. March Madness, 64 teams, there's one that wins. One wins their final game. The other 63 all just lost a game to end the season, right?
Right.
And as an athlete, they typically, 99% of the time, tell you when your career is going to end, right? Not like, hey, Scott, I'm thinking about playing 3 more years, and then as Tom Brady, I'm going to decide when I want to retire. And then we're like, hey, Tom, whenever you want to go, right?
Right.
And that's a unique quality in a major athlete, right? And we know, and we can almost count them on 2 hands, the amount of athletes who have had that luxury of opportunity in their career, because the rest of us get fired. And so it's a tough challenge that all of a sudden you really got to find who you are as a person, and don't tie yourself to the press clippings. Don't tie yourself to what people say that you don't even know. And out of all respect for Scott Morgenroth, the columnist, the media personality, you could say anything about me as an athlete, as a coach. I don't have to agree with it. He's entitled to his opinion as a professional in the field, and that's awesome. But I don't have to tie that into who I am. And I think as a young man, that was a hard lesson. I hadn't known it, and I got a little case of that believe your press clippings, right?
Right.
And when everything's going great, it's like, oh, hey, Trent can't do any wrong and won another game. And then you strike out with the bases loaded one night in a big game, and the media will absolutely, and the town and the fans, trade him, get him out of here. And it's like, holy crap, man. They loved me like 24 hours ago. Right?
Yeah.
And it switches very quickly. So if you don't have this place inside of your heart about who you are, what you're about, what your purpose is doing here, I think you are going to run into some significant challenges along the way. And this imposter syndrome is going to creep up on you. It's going to overtake you. It's going to limit your opportunities. And the first limiter will be you, because as soon as imposter syndrome comes in, it means I'm going to start negative self-talk. So the thing I would never do with my good friend, Scott, the Motor City Madmouth, is tell him bad things. He's a friend of mine. I want to encourage him. He's a great media personality. I love working with him. So I would never say those things to Scott, but yet here I am sitting and looking in the mirror, telling myself horrible things. And the first voice I go to bed and wake up with is my own voice in my own head. And now that the imposter syndrome I've let in is not positive.
Interesting. You know what I liked about what you said with the whole thing, though, and you said a lot, and you really said an awful lot, folks. Our main objective here is if you can take one thing and learn, it's great. If you can take a whole lot more, you'll be able to do it. And you can always replay these episodes as often as you want. Have a nice notepad. But here's the thing, okay? I've never been one of those individuals that worries if somebody's better than I am. I could really care less. That's all subjective, anyways. My goal is to make sure I'm the best that I can be myself. Don't worry about the competition. Your biggest competition is yourself. And as long as you can go out there and keep it in perspective and you do that, you'll be fine. I mean, you know what? Who says I got to be better than this guy? Does he think you? Anybody that thinks that they're better than me and they're willing to advertise it, you know what that word comes to my mind? Insecurity. If you're worried about telling me how much better than you are than I am, I think you need to check yourself an egotistical door. Because I have a size foot 11 and I will park it someplace. I'm not like Gus the Mule, okay, who can kick field goals the length of a field. The only thing that would stop you if you had beer from the other people. You ever see that movie Gus the Mule?
I was going to say, you just dated yourself. That's like a 70s movie right there,
Yeah,
Scott.
well, this is 70s movie. It was G-rated. Serious, I know. I know. Well, what do you think all this gray hair came from? Seriously. I don't want to take my head off because I don't want to disguise the name of who I really am. And I usually have one rant every night. And when I'm on with a bunch of people, I'm laughing anyway. But no, the reality is your biggest competition isn't them. It's you. Period. Right? I can only be accountable for my preparation. If somebody doesn't like it, too bad. Everybody's got opinions, and many of them aren't very good. I could sit here and use more harsher language, but I won't. I want to keep it G-rated here. But the reality is this: imposter syndrome. You know what imposter syndrome is for me? Is if I'm trying to fool myself to think I'm better than I am, because I know exactly how much preparation I put into this thing, so it better be good. If it isn't, then I'll just continue to improve on the next one. That's all. But I love the idea you come up with imposter syndrome. Scottie Pippen, obviously, when it came down to crunch time, he collapsed when Michael Jordan left. He didn't even want to go into a game. He really didn't. That's imposter syndrome. All right, Scotty, now you want Michael Jordan's right hand man, okay? Now it's your turn. I don't do that, Coach Jackson. Okay, I never liked him anyway, so it doesn't matter. So for all you Chicago people that don't like me, well, I'll give you another reason to hate me anyway. But in my opinion, he should never have been the top 50 to 75 players ever. And they left a couple of my Detroit Pistons out of it. That'll be for another day, for another time. But imposter syndrome, when it comes to crunch time, he didn't want no part of it. Michael Jordan did all the work, but I'm not saying that Michael Jordan would have had the championships without the guy, but he was his puppet, okay, his right-hand man, okay, just like Shoes Huffman was. Magic Johnson carried his shoes and all that. Nobody would know who Shoes Huffman is in 1979 with Michigan State Spartans. They all knew Greg Kelser, Shoes Huffman.
Right.
But that's who they know. But imposter syndrome is, like you say, you defined it pretty well. But, to me, the only way you're not going to be any good is if you don't put the preparation in. Now, I'm not going to sit here and deny many years ago that I didn't wait till the last minute to study when I was a young kid. But let me tell you, the deeper you get into education when it comes to not only high school, college, you can't afford to do that because you know what? There's too much material to blow it. And that's when you know what you have to do. And never get away with that. But continue on. Great point.
I love that. I love that, you kind of pointed that back. It's really on you. And staying with John Wooden, define success as the peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing you did your best to become the best that you are capable of becoming. Hey man, that is not what he did or what she did no, it's what you feel about your best, about the best, knowing I've done the work. And I think that's why I've never had a problem with someone coming out on a tennis court and whipping my keister. Like, if you came out and you did the prep and you're better than I am today, hey, listen, man, I tip the cap and go, I got to get to work, because those days motivated me, man. I didn't like them, right, Scott? I'll be the straight guy to say I don't like losing. So, I don't like those days. But I don't hold that against anybody because they were better than me. They did the work, they're prepped, and they should have that self-satisfaction in knowing that they did their best to become. And man, I had a very valuable lesson with a guy named Daryl Davies, my college coach in tennis, one of my second coaches, and just a great mentor of mine, taught university, and he's featured in the book, and love Daryl. And one of the things that just really stuck in my mind was, as a probably 19-year-old kid, I was overly competitive to the fact that losing almost made me physically sick. I would replace that feeling of illness. The only thing I could replace the illness feeling of this just eating my gut was anger.
Right.
That was the only thing. That's a bad recipe, folks. Scott, you can imagine how that turned out. It was not positive. I recall embarrassing my parents, throwing a tirade. I was a small McEnroe out there. And I'm thinking, man, embarrassed about my actions.
Right.
And he came to me one day, very Wooden-esque, and said, hey, I got to ask you, are you doing your best out there? Which, of course, almost lit me up. I think he was risking his jawline at that point, because, I'm so intense at this age that I could have thrown a punch. Now, out of respect, he's my coach. I'm never going to do that, right?
Right.
And I consider myself coachable, so I'm ready for feedback. But he could see the level of intensity and anger in my eyes the moment he asked that. Like, you've got to be kidding me, because he knows I'm giving 100% effort. There was never a time in a match, a game, I was unwilling to do that, because I get to control that. And I said, of course. And he said, I don't know what more of yourself you could ask. And I was stumped, Scott. I was like, well, I could, you know, I was doing my best. What I figured out was what I could have asked of myself was being better prepared, taking in more reps. That's what I could have done. I could have done a bunch of things before this moment, but he is right in the fact in this moment, all I can do is the best I can. And I found some real salvation, Scott, in the fact that when I went out there and I did my best, I found out that I played some good players like Aaron Crickstein, another
Mhm.
good Ghost Point guy, and Detroit man. And Aaron Crickstein was way better than I am. I didn't play very well, not because I wasn't giving all the effort. It was because Aaron was way better than I was, and he's forcing me to hit bad shots out of position, because he's very well prepared. He had done all the work. And so, am I going to be mad that he's a much better player than me in that moment? No. Like, I'm not mad at him. Like, he'd done the work and I had not. And so, in fairness to him, I'm not upset about losing. Like, would I have loved to have won? Yes, I would have. Was I disappointed that I wasn't as good as he was? Yes, I was. But I hold no ill will towards someone that's better than me, that's put in the time, because they should feel that self-satisfaction.
Well, you know what? It's funny how you say that, because I'm going to give you one more story. Well, one more thing we get to here is Motor City Madmouth. My name is Scott Morganroth. Please be joined by Trent Clark, author of Winners. Go ahead.
Leading winning teams.
Yeah,
Leading
there
winning
you
teams.
go. I want you to
Yep.
put. I only did that so you had to give you an excuse to put the book up.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just doing that. But anyways, you bring up an interesting point though. I'll never forget the time. And one more thing I want to get to tonight before just the Sports Exchange will follow us. But I remember doing it my first argumentation and debate class or debate in junior college. Now, there were two topics. Okay, one was women's lib. Okay, I walked in there that first one unprepared, and I was making statements where the class faculty turned against me. Really, really, really. I thought I had like 25 enemies looking at me after what I did there. I think, oh my God, this was not a good situation, and I was graded down to a D on this one. Okay, but I deserved it. Okay, I did. So now all of a sudden I'm taking an opinion side of a very controversial issue. But again, we're talking college. You make your mistakes then and not in the real world. So I got another chance at the same person. Okay. I ended up getting another topic called the professional air traffic controllers. You're not supposed to strike against the government, right? And you want to know something? I prepped as hard as I could. And you know what? The result was way better. And you know what the teacher told me? Even though you got a D on the first one, and rightfully so, I said, I deserved it. Don't, it is what it is. She gave me like a B plus on it. She ended up giving me a B for the class because I was
Mm.
able to go ahead and accept my mistakes about what I had done and say, you know what? We're in class. This is not the real world. You took a tougher subject, PATCO, Professional Air Traffic Controller, where Ronald Reagan, President Reagan, fired all of those workers and brought in new ones because you're not supposed to strike against the government. And I argued that he was right. And as a result, the teacher saw, hey, he put in the research, and the other person, hey, good job. I mean, you bounced back better than anybody I've ever seen. So it's okay to lose in that sense, as long as you can take that losing situation, be humble about it, okay, and be able to make it better. And that's why it worked out. And when you brought up your example about Christine, well, you talk about hitting home with that relation you did. So great stuff on your end. All right, one other thing I want to get to here tonight, and now that we've been so serious this show, we're gonna be a little bit lighthearted, okay? I think, and that's it. We're going to talk about police officer pulled over a self-driving car for driving on the wrong side of the road. First of all, Trent, I have to ask you the toughest question I've ever asked you all night. Would you ever own a self-driving car?
I think I would, man. I've driven the cab in Phoenix that they're testing, and it was pretty cool. And I am concerned and alarmed about when it's going to be good enough. But man, I have found driving to be dangerous with more distractions than ever. And I would love to have driving Mr. Daisy over here and love to have a driver who did driving for me. So if I felt like the autonomous driving was right where I wanted to be, I think I'd enjoy it. I think I would take that in. It concerns me, this story, right? Because here's the autonomous car and it's driving on the wrong side of the road, which is alarming again. There are some bad stories of death and things with the autonomous cars. So it's challenging. I don't think it's there yet. I do think me and George Jetson will own one in my lifetime, but I don't think it's going to be in the next couple of years.
Let me tell you something, pal. You want a driver? When I'm right, I'm right. And one of these days, I'm going to bring on King of the Road hat here in my hat bin. I will pull that off. There is no way I will have a self-driving car. For those people that know who I am, I get better in the middle of the night. I listen to my YouTube music with all my zillion tunes where I can just stick them on to keep moving and moving and moving.
Yeah.
Give me a little bit of caffeine, it gets even worse, a lot worse. If you think I'm letting having one of them autonomous cars drive me, then Santa Claus is Jewish. He is. And I'm not doing it. I am not doing it. No way. I don't want to do it. No. If you ever need a chauffeur, I'll drive it. You ain't getting in one of those because I have an investment in you here. I need you around as a co-host for a while. I don't need you to have an unproven piece of technology running you into some cotton-picking stupid wall that isn't the Berlin Wall, okay? And that's just how it is. Now, let me tell you this, okay? I do agree with you about the George Jetson mobile because here's the thing. I don't have to sit here and go out there and worry about I-95 traffic. No way. I'd rather go over it.
Yes. I think you got to hold up the Diet Mountain Dew when you rant. By the way, I think you got to be charged by the dew.
Yeah, but my other half goes out there. She says I have to cut you off at 5 o'clock, but don't worry, I've had enough leading up to it. So, but here's the deal, okay? No, I'm just telling you, there's no way you're driving one of them. Not if you're in my state. I'll make sure you drive. Then you can do what the heck you want. I'm not autonomous. I don't know what the heck I am, but not that. Seriously, the George Jetson mobile is another story. I mean, if I'm way up there, I don't want to be. There many years ago, there used to be a bumper sticker in South Florida called "Will the last American leaving Miami bring the flag?" And if you know what that means, it means there's a lot of non-Americans in Dade County. Okay, if you don't know it, you don't know it. You and me talk after the show, we texted all that. So no, there's no way I'll be caught dead in one of those. No way. I'm driving until the Secretary of State or the Department of Driving in Florida or anybody says I can't, or for that matter, a higher authority called GOD says I'm not able to drive a CAR or TRUCK or VAN, if you get the drift.
I get the drift. All right.
I'm king of the road, man. And
agree and disagree.
Forget it. I'm the Motor City Man and king of the road. And you're a great co-host.
All right. Good. Thank you,
and that's
Scott.
pressure, man. That's pressure. Bring it on. Bring it on. Am I loud enough? Am I going to turn red? I did last night, and all my co-hosts laughed. Oh, well.
Anyway, Fired up.
This is the Motor City Madhouse Show. I'm Scott Morganroth. My co-host is Trent Clark. And even though they don't have the Clark bar, it's okay. This Clark still has an awful lot of, taste inside of him when it comes to adversity, and so do I. So we hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Motor City Madhouse Show. But before we hit the road here, Trent, put up that book of yours and tell them how they can buy it.
You can buy Leading Winning Teams right now, all on Kindle. Kindle's the cheapest right now on Amazon. Barnes & Noble, you can buy it for your Kindle right now, Leading Winning Teams. You can get it at bit.ly at Trent LWT. Trent LWT, bit.ly. And that's an easy way to go to my author page. And it's all sorts of options where you can get bulk options. You can get speaking engagements there with the books. All sorts of different offers that we're making right there. But super excited about the book launch next Tuesday. If you haven't heard about that, check out that page. Jump and join us because there's going to be great content on that day, on the 27th, Tuesday 27th. And if you can't be there live, no problem. I'll send you the recordings And if you get a ticket to that event, I will personally send you a personalized signed copy of the hardcover book. That's what I'm doing for everybody, Scott. So trying to take care of them. Tell them where they can find yours.
All right. Well, you can find mine on at Barnes and Noble, Amazon Kindle. We're going to be working on an audio book, Amazon Kindle, Barnes and Noble, Apple, Google, and a few of the other ones, but mainly the two ones is Barnes and Noble and Amazon and Kindle. And the thing that I enjoy about it is this. Okay, you know, I'm working on a second one. And I think that all I'll be doing with the second one is updating what I see in the industry. But in addition to what I'll be seeing in the industry, okay, I just want to make sure that we're able to catch up about what it's going to be like going forward. After the second version of this, that's it. We start something else. And I want to let everybody know that Trent Clark also appears on 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. So when we're not out here talking about our brand, I put Mr. Baseball here in front of him. Okay, so we can talk about the sport that got him 3 rings. So there you go. Monday night, he joins us a couple times a month. It usually starts about 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed to South Florida Tribune YouTube channel, please do so you can see Scott and Trent there. And of course, this is my book. How often can you come on a show when you have 2 authors talking about essentially the same thing and giving life lessons? Tonight's obviously episode is called Under Pressure, and we hope we've enlightened you about some of the experiences that we've had, and we have plenty more good episodes with Trent and I, because that's to let you know that Trent and I at some point down the road are going to be co-authoring a book as well, and as time goes on we'll release those details as well. So and you want to let everybody know how they can get a hold of you otherwise, Trent?
Yep, you can always reach me at trent@leadershipity.com. That's leadershipity.com. Email me there. I am on LinkedIn. Please connect with me. You can follow me, the Leadershipity YouTube channel. We have all sorts of content there. And of course, I can't wait to hear from you. And on our Leadershipity site, on the website, you can have a click and you can get a 15-minute call with me anytime. So I'd love it. If you got a project or something you want to talk about, I'm here to talk about it.
And just let everybody know, LinkedIn's great because that's how I met my buddy Trent. So,
Yep.
we have a lot of good things we're looking forward to having. And these shows that we do here, we definitely, they're anything but boring. And I'll just say this about me being a broadcaster. A microphone is like a lollipop. I can never have enough of it. So there you go. Go figure. And that didn't come with a Mountain Dew analogy. That's been one that I've been repeating, like that word called a cliche, but nobody knows about it except yours truly. So with that said, we want to thank everybody for joining us on the Motor City Mad Mouth Show. Trent will be with me on Monday night on 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. We'll be doing this show at least 2 times a month, possibly 3, depending on what we come up for. But we promise you'll be able to learn every time and be entertained when we're on here together. I talk about one of my best co-hosts in the system. This guy is it with a capital I and an exclamation point, 48 point. If anybody knows what that means, it's the biggest break you can get. So of course, nowadays everybody does it online. But anyways, I want to thank you very much for joining us on the Motor City Man Mouth Show. My name is Scott Morganroth, once again, Motor City Man Mouth, along with my co-host Trent Clark. Thank you very much. We'll catch you the next time. Good night, everybody.